Throughout NBA history, we've witnessed a wide variety of different all-time greats display their talents in the league, but unfortunately, we would never get to see legends such as LeBron James and Michael Jordan face off against one another due to them playing in different eras, which is why we're going to be erasing today's NBA and filling the rosters with nothing but the greatest players of all time to see who can come out on top and win the Larry O'Brien Trophy. And of course, starting things off with the Philadelphia 76ers, if you have a quick look at the roster, these guys are pretty insane. Wilt Chamberlain is back alongside Kevin McHale, but there are also so many other great players to go over. I see guys like Grant Hill, Dennis Johnson. Scrolling down even further, there's also players like Mike Bibby. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, this team actually seems like they may end up being really, really good, but that's kind of hard to judge right now just because we haven't seen any of the other teams. But having a look at the Milwaukee Bucks, this team has Kobe Bryant, Paul Pierce, and Gary Payton. Now, just based off of those three alone, I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that these guys are going to be competing for an NBA title. And I didn't even mention, but they also have Kevin Love, Ben Wallace, and Bam Adebayo. Prime Victor Oladipo is also here as well. So in my opinion, I think that these guys may or may not be the favorites to win the championship. Now, the Chicago Bulls are here with Dwayne Wade, Bob Cousy, and Dwight Howard. In comparison to the previous two teams, I don't think they're going to be as great as what Milwaukee and Philly was. And that's not going to be at the fault of Dwayne Wade and Dwight Howard, because I think it's just going to come down to the lack of depth that these guys have. Now, obviously, if this was any other simulation, they would go 82-0, but because the NBA is filled with pretty much every single Hall of Famer, I'd assume it's going to be difficult to win games with these guys. And heading over to Cleveland, we have the Cavaliers with Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony, and Anthony Edwards. Now, this roster right here is for sure going to be competing as well, and the reason I say that is because Melo and Ant are really, really good in simulation. They also have Drew Holiday down here, and usually in stuff like this, he's a huge common denominator between championship level teams. But heading over to Boston, we have Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and Bill Walton. I'm sure I don't even have to say it, but it is kind of funny that we have KD and Russ alongside one another yet again. And not only that, but KD has another former teammate in Klay Thompson, so I would definitely not be surprised to see these guys in the playoffs as well. But the Los Angeles Clippers have Clyde Drexler, Dominique Wilkins, and Bob McAdoo. Now, I'm not too familiar with a lot of the players on this team, so I can't really make a fair assumption on how good they're going to be, but just based off the fact that they have this dynamic trio right here, I think it's safe to assume that they won't be a bottom conference team. Now, the Memphis Grizzlies have Tim Duncan, Isaiah Thomas, and Devin Booker. And when I say Isaiah Thomas, I'm not talking about the one that's like 5'9". What I'm actually talking about is the IT that played in the 80s and 90s. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I really like the formation of this roster because, I mean, you have a defensive anchor in Tim Duncan who can also get plenty of rebounds and score the ball just as nice as anybody else. Isaiah Thomas, who is also a scoring threat and one of the greatest playmakers of all time, stacked up alongside a modern day Devin Booker who can hit plenty of threes. I also didn't even go over the role players. Some names that you might be familiar with are Darius Garland and Brandon Jennings. Harrison Barnes is also down here as well. Outside of that, I don't really know anybody else besides AK-47, so I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next team, who has LeBron James, Ray Allen, and Dave Cowens. Tyrese Halliburton is also here alongside John Wall. Just because this team has arguably the greatest player of all time, they're definitely going to be in playoff contention. It'd be pretty disappointing if this team was somehow not even the 6th seed. The Miami Heat are here with James Harden, Charles Barkley, and Jason Tatum. Now, I know Charles Barkley technically isn't in the game, but the roster that I downloaded had a pretty solid replica version. Heading over to the Charlotte Hornets, we have Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, and Dikembe Mutombo. The defensive presence that this team is going to have is going to be out of this world, but the Utah Jazz are here with Larry Bird, Penny Hardaway, and Bob Pettit. There's not too many players on this team that I could really say much about, but Marc Gasol, Trae Young, and Danny Granger, those are like really the only other players I'm familiar with. Now, the Sacramento Kings are definitely a different story because they have Julius Erving, Derrick Rose, and Pete Maravich. Obviously, I wasn't even alive to watch these two right here play, but with D Rose, Chris Middleton, and Jamal Murray being a part of the roster, I'd say that this team has a pretty decent blend between modern and old NBA players. And now for the New York Knicks, we have Michael Jordan, Steve Nash, and Robert Parrish. At the 6-man position, we actually have Rajon Rondo. If I'm going to be honest, this is actually a great scenario for MJ to end up in because he has some of the 2 greatest point guards to ever touch a basketball on his team. But the Los Angeles Lakers are here with Oscar Robertson, James Worthy, and Reggie Miller. The best part of this team isn't just their big 3, but it's also who they have playing at the center position, with the prime Rudy Gobert being a part of the starting 5 and Victor Wembanyama coming off the bench. It's going to be nearly impossible to get anything easy under the rim. The Orlando Magic have Hakeem Olajuwon, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Butler and Rick Barry. Now looking through the rest of this lineup, really the only two players that I got to watch were Darren Williams and Shea, and everyone else I'm not really as familiar with. Now heading all the way over to Texas with the Dallas Mavericks, this team's big three consists of Giannis Antetokounmpo, Moses Malone, and Damian Lillard. Earlier we had Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook playing with each other yet again. This time around we have two all-stars from the Milwaukee Bucks. The Brooklyn Nets have Allen Iverson, Scottie Pippen, and Alonzo Mourning. These guys are for sure going to be playing a hard-nosed version of basketball. Well, actually, maybe not because they have Kyle Kuzma, but just about everybody who's getting minutes classifies as an enforcer. And the Denver Nuggets have John Stockton, Tracy McGrady, and Wes Unseld. When having a look at the rest of the starting five and the bench lineup, I highly doubt that these guys are even going to make the playoffs. And yet again, we have another team that I'm not too confident in. The Indiana Pacers have Walt Frazier, Vince Carter, Willis Reed. Blake Griffin's also here as well with Bradley Beal, but the New Orleans Pelicans have David Robinson, Tony Parker, and Dennis Rodman. I'm pretty confident that these players are going to be able to hold their own against the rest of the rosters. Does that make them a playoff team? I'm not really too sure. I feel like they're probably going to be in the play-in area, but I don't really know. We're just going to have to see. Now the Detroit Pistons have Jerry West, George Gervin, and Elvin Hayes. Yao Ming is also going to be this team's starting center, but the Toronto Raptors have Kevin Garnett, Nikola Jokic, and Mitch Richmond. That is actually really surprising that KG and Jokic are both on the same team. Kyrie Irving's also a part of the roster as well with Andre Iguodala. Now heading over to the Houston Rockets, we have Stephen Curry, John Havlicek, and Dolph Schayes. Low-key, I really feel bad for Steph because he's for sure going to have to carry this entire team on his back. But heading over to the San Antonio Spurs, we have Luka Doncic, Elgin Baylor, and Chris Webber. Gordon Hayward, who was an absolute demon in the last video, was also playing for these guys as well. The Phoenix Suns have Magic Johnson, Jimmy Butler, and David Thompson. I would 100% guarantee that these guys are going to be a playoff team. Are they going to be the NBA champions? I doubt it, but they definitely do have a better shot than most. I'm not too sure if the same thing could be said for the OKC Thunder, as they have Bill Russell, Jerry Lucas, and Manu Ginobili. And I mean, as long as this team can produce enough offense, they should actually end up being okay, because having Bill Russell on your team, your defense is already going to be really good. Now the Minnesota Timberwolves have Patrick Ewing, Paul George, and Mark Price. As a Clippers fan, if I'm going to be real, it's kind of hard to look at Paul George right now. It kind of feels like my girl just left me or something. Now Donovan Mitchell recently just signed an extension with the Cavaliers, rightfully so, because low-key he's one of my favorite guards in the league. I would love to see him win a championship at some point. I doubt it's going to be this next season or even inside this video, but you know, the NBA is so random at times, you never know what could happen. And heading all the way up to Portland, we have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jason Kidd, and Joe Dumars. Now since they have a top 5 player of all time on their team, championship aspirations are for sure an important factor. And I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like their bench depth is somewhat lacking. For that reason, they may or may not be a first or second round exit. And joining the Golden State Warriors, we have Shaquille O'Neal, Paul Gasol, and Sidney Moncrief. I also see Jaylen Brown and DeMarcus Cousins as well. But finally, with the Washington Wizards, we have Dirk Nowitzki, Joel Embiid, and Chris Mullin. This is for sure the best roster Dirk has ever had around him, which, I mean, I guess you could say that for just about everyone. But anyways, that's going to do it for all the teams in the NBA. If you haven't been enjoying so far, you should definitely consider leaving me a like and subscribing. Now all we could do was simulate to the All-Star break and see how all the rosters are performing so far. Your top 3 seeds in the Eastern Conference are the Cleveland Cavaliers, Philadelphia 76ers, and Brooklyn Nets. Having a look at Cleveland, this roster has Chris Paul, Anthony Edwards, and Carmelo Anthony. I don't know if you guys remember what I told you, but both Melo and Ant are absolutely crazy in simulation. But Philadelphia, as we all know, they have Wilt Chamberlain. Brooklyn is here with Allen Iverson. James Harden's Miami Heat is actually ahead of LeBron's Atlanta Hawks. But you know what? We got to see who's at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Sitting at 16 and 39, we have the Boston Celtics. Now I have absolutely no idea how this could have happened, because I mean, your entire starting 5 consists of almost nothing but Hall of Famers. And not only that, but Kevin Durant is like top 20, top 15 all time. Russell Westbrook's definitely up there as well with Klay Thompson. So this one actually makes like absolutely no sense to me. Usually when we look at the bottom team, you can kind of understand like, oh, because I mean, they have this player and he's not that good and he's their highest rated overall. But this one's just like, how could this have possibly simply happen. And over in the Western Conference, we have the San Antonio Spurs, Los Angeles Clippers, and OKC Thunder. As we all know, the Spurs have Elgin Baylor and Luka Doncic. And in our last video, Gordon Hayward was playing for the 1-seeded Utah Jazz. So for him to be back on top 2 times in a row, that definitely just goes to show that he's a lot better than what his overall says. But my LA Clippers are actually the 2 seed, and they have Clyde Drexler, Dominique Wilkins. Bill Russell's leading the OKC Thunder, and Utah has Larry Bird and Penny Hardaway. And you know what? As always, we have to see who's sitting at 15th place. In this simulation, it's the Dallas Mavericks with Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. And you know, I'm actually like really disappointed in this group. Not only did they not reach expectations in real life, but that was mainly due to injuries. This time they're all in their prime and fully healthy, and still for whatever reason could not compete with anybody else in the NBA. And at the end of the regular season, Elgin Baylor is your most valuable player. Of course, Rookie of the Year goes to Victor Wembanyama. Manu Ginobili is 6th Man of the Year, and Bill Russell is the DPOY. And as you can see here, Al Horford wins Most Improved, and Tracy McGrady is Clutch Player of the Year. Having a look at All-NBA First Team, Michael Jordan placed 2nd in MVP. Wilt Chamberlain is also up here as well with LeBron James and Magic Johnson. And All-NBA Second Team has Tracy McGrady, Gilbert Arenas, Tim Duncan, and Oscar Robertson. As for All-NBA Third Team, we have 2 members of the Utah Jazz, James Harden, Scottie Pippen, and David Thompson. And here are the lists for both All Defensive First and Second Team. Now really quick, I'm going to simulate the play-in tournament so we can see who makes it in and who gets eliminated. It looks like the Denver Nuggets, Houston Rockets, Charlotte Hornets, and Chicago Bulls are no longer going to be in playoff contention. For our very first match of the postseason, we have the Miami Heat going up against the New York Knicks. And I'm sure all of you remember that New York has Michael Jordan, but just to serve as a memory refresher, the Miami Heat have James Harden, Jason Tatum, and Charles Barkley. Now when comparing starting fives, you could say that the Miami Heat are better, but I personally think that we're going to have to give it to the New York Knicks. In game number 1, it looks like Miami is going to pull away. Jason Tatum dropped 33 points, 3 rebounds, and 8 assists. Meanwhile, Michael Jordan only had 25, 2, and 2. Now up next, we have the Orlando Magic and Brooklyn Nets. I believe the Magic are the favorites to win the series based off seeding, but I'm actually going to give it to Brooklyn just because they have AI and Scottie Pippen. After simulating game number 1, that was definitely not the right pick. Hakeem dropped 34 points, 14 rebounds, and 1 assist. Shea also nearly had a 24-point double-double. Allen Iverson did lead his team in scoring with 25 points. Now over in the Western Conference, we have the OKC Thunder going up against the Golden State Warriors. Now this series is going to be very, very interesting, mainly due to the fact that you have Shaquille O'Neal going up against Bill Russell. It's kind of difficult to choose which one of these teams I think is going to win. I'm more familiar with the Warriors players, but I think OKC will get it done. And after simulating their very first game, it looks like that will not be the case. Ja Morant led his team in scoring with 25, and Shaquille O'Neal had 29, 17, and 5. But up next, we have the Utah Jazz going up against the Los Angeles Lakers. And for the very first match of the series, the Lakers are going to end up getting the win. And as the 7th seed, the Atlanta Hawks are going to be playing the Philadelphia 76ers. This Hawks team actually wasn't doing too good halfway throughout the season. Unfortunately, their very first opponent is one of those teams many believe to win the championship this year, so it'd definitely be a shocker if they won the series, but in game number 1, that is not going to happen. Wilt Chamberlain dropped 25 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. And since there are so many series to go over, I'm going to go ahead and simulate a little bit further. As of right now, we have multiple series where both teams are tied 2-2, while the rest of them have one team sitting up 3 games to 1. And unfortunately, in only 4 games, the Phoenix Suns are going to be swept by the Los Angeles Clippers. And you know what? Let me go ahead and simulate a little bit further. The OKC Thunder have been eliminated, quickly followed by the Atlanta Hawks. And at this point, Miami is facing elimination. There is a chance of them pulling away and forcing a game 7, but it's seems like they aren't going to be able to do it. Now at this point, Brooklyn does have a chance to move on in only 6 games, and with Allen Iverson leading the charge, they are going to get it done. In game 6, Amari Stoudemire had 32 points, 9 rebounds, and 1 assist. Hakeem Olajuwon dropped 22 and 7, but it just wasn't enough. Now if the Lakers don't get the win at home, they'll unfortunately be placed into a game 7, and at this point it looks like that's exactly what's going to happen. To keep the season alive, Larry Bird dropped 44 points, 5 rebounds, and 11 assists. Oscar Robertson had 36-5-9. And back in the Eastern Conference, Cleveland's going to keep their season alive as well. But you could definitely not say the same thing about the San Antonio Spurs, because as of right now, they're down by 4 points with 13.5 seconds remaining. If they want to have a chance at winning this game, they have to make that shot, but it is no good and rebounded by Karl Malone. And yeah, if he makes this one as well, I'm pretty sure that will seal the game. Just like that, Minnesota is going to eliminate the MVP in round number 1. Now, the Utah Jazz do have home court advantage, but it looks like it's not going to amount to anything as they are going to be eliminated. To get the win, Reggie Miller dropped 27 points, 3 rebounds, and 6 assists. Also in a game 7, Cleveland is going to pull away. Carmelo Anthony dropped 38 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists. He did this to eliminate Paul Pierce, Kobe Bryant, and Gary Payton. Up first in the second round, we have the Los Angeles Clippers and Golden State Warriors. The key matchups to keep in mind this series is Jaylen Brown versus Dominique Wilkins, Paul Gasol versus Spencer Haywood, Sidney Moncrief versus Clyde Drexler, and Shaquille O'Neal versus Bob McAdoo. Now, as a Clippers fan, I kind of like Golden State's team more, but I'm going to stay loyal to the Clips, and I'm glad I did because they won this game by 40 points. Now, the New York Knicks have to take down Wilt Chamberlain's Philadelphia 76ers. To get the win, Michael Jordan had 27 points, 3 rebounds, and 6 assists. But heading all the way back to LA, we have the Lakers and Timberwolves. Throughout the regular season, this Minnesota team was actually the 10th seed, so it's actually really impressive that they've even made it this far. In game number 1, they are going to get the win as well. For our 4th and final matchup, it's the Cleveland Cavaliers and Brooklyn Nets. And in their very first matchup, it goes to Brooklyn. Alonzo Mourning dropped 32 points, 5 rebounds, and 0 assists. And the majority of the Cleveland roster did have a great performance. At this point, we have 3 series where the leading team is up 3-0. So far, the only series that seems to be competitive is Philadelphia versus New York. After simulating even further, the Golden State Warriors have been eliminated. That unfortunately is followed by the Cleveland Cavaliers. So in game number 5, Philly's up 3-1. Pretty unlikely to come back from a 3-1 deficit, but the New York Knicks are going to get things done. Michael Jordan had 29 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists. As the 10th seed in the regular season, Minnesota is going to move on to the conference finals. And like I said, this Timberwolves team was far too good to be placed down that far. Now, back in the Eastern Conference, Philly is going to move on in 6 games. To finish off the series, Wilt Chamberlain had 22 points, 20 rebounds, and 5 assists. In the Eastern Conference Finals, it's Philly going up against Brooklyn. As long as Alonzo Mourning can stop Wilt Chamberlain, the Nets will have a chance of winning their very first NBA championship. And as of right now, the momentum is definitely shifting their way. Back in the West, we have the Los Angeles Clippers and Minnesota Timberwolves. It would be kind of insane if the 10th seed managed to make it to the NBA Finals, but unfortunately, in game number 1, the Clippers are going to get it done. Nate Archibald had 28 points, 2 rebounds, 17 assists. Clyde Drexler, Dominique Wilkins, and many others also had 20 as well. And after simulating 2 more games, Brooklyn is leading the series, while the Clippers are nearly sweeping their 3rd team in a row. In game number 4, it looks like Philadelphia is going to tie the series. If Los Angeles can win this game, they'll make their very first NBA Finals. It looks like that's exactly what's going to happen as the Timberwolves are eliminated. As of right now, Philadelphia is up 3-2. Brooklyn was on the verge of defeat, but they will go on to force a game 7. To keep the series alive, Allen Iverson dropped 39 points, 1 rebound, and 9 assists. But unfortunately, it looks like it won't amount to anything as Philadelphia does win game 7. And our 4th round NBA Finals matchup is officially set. This is the first time the Sixers have not been the favorites. And as always, the Clippers' main goal is to keep Wilt Chamberlain at bay. If they can do that, this championship is theirs to lose. And in game number 1, the Clippers do pull away. Clyde Drexler had 26 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists. A handful of players also had double-doubles, but Wilt Chamberlain only had 19 points. If the Sixers want to win a title, they need him to step it up. And in game number 2, my Clippers are going to get the win yet again. So far, LA has yet to lose a single game in the postseason. So you know what? Let me go ahead and simulate through this 3rd game, and it looks like, yeah, they're setting up 3-0. It looks like the Los Angeles Clippers are your brand new NBA champions. That was probably the most dominant playoff run we've ever seen in this channel's history. They won 4 straight series without losing a single game. And your NBA Finals MVP is Bob McAdoo. If you want to see more like this, be sure to check out my most recent video where we reset the NBA and put everyone back in their prime. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. I'm out.